The purpose of EARLI is to understand both genetic and environmental causes of autism by looking at the earliest possible period during conception and through pregnancy, as well as the early parts of a new baby's life. To be eligible for EARLI, we focused on an enriched cohort design. That means we're focusing on families who already have a child with an autism spectrum disorder, who are pregnant or thinking of becoming pregnant with a subsequent child. And we participate with these families through a long period of both pregnancy and the child's early life. And for that reason, we would like to recruit families that live within a 2-hour radius of Johns Hopkins Hospital, so that all of these kinds of interactions can be as easy as possible on the family to get to us and for us to get to them. We've designed EARLI to be as comprehensive as possible to reach the goal of understanding causes of autism both from an environmental perspective and a genetics perspective. And that means we're getting information from all sorts of different avenues, both in terms of biological samples, meaning taking samples of blood and urine and even breast milk and other types of samples during pregnancy and during this new baby's life, as well as at delivery. In addition to those biosamples, we collect information via questionnaire, both interviews and things that a mom may fill out about her experiences during pregnancy and during the new baby's life. And importantly, we also collect lots of information on the environment by actually going to a home and seeing what kinds of cleaners do you use, what other kinds of things are present in your household. And finally, probably the key piece of information we get is how your child is developing. So we actually look at children both at 6 months, at a year, at 24 months, and 36 months to really understand their developmental milestones as we watch each of these babies develop, which is very exciting for us as researchers, because not only do we get to follow you through pregnancy, we get to experience that sort of explosion of milestones in your new baby's life. To gather this information on how your child is developing, or how children in this study are developing, we partner with the Kennedy Krieger Institute, who has a track record of following children from 6 months through these early developmental milestones with an eye to early signs of autism. So this is really a unique resource of a group that has already been looking for these kinds of milestones specific to this group. EARLI has focused on recruiting women during pregnancy and following them through pregnancy as well as the early life of the baby, because there's some growing evidence that the causes of autism may be during this in utero or pregnancy period. And if that's true, this is a unique opportunity to follow those kinds of events, or to see how genes, both the mom's and the child or developing baby's genes, interact with experiences that happen during pregnancy. And in that setting, this kind of design is really the only way to get really rigorous information. Otherwise, we're asking families in a term we call retrospectively about what happened during pregnancy once their child is already between 2 and maybe even 5 years of age. And it's very difficult to remember with any accuracy things that were going on back then. So we call this a prospective study that gets to look at this very critical window through time. And as a pregnant person myself with my second child, I understand how critical that could be, but how difficult and what kind of resource we're really asking of these families to participate with us during that pregnancy. It's a very busy time when you already have at least one child at home, and now you're going through pregnancy for a second time. So we're incredibly appreciative of these families and the time that they have committed to us. So there are several reasons that a family would want to participate in a study like EARLI. I think an important one is to contribute to the growing knowledge about what may be causing autism. And I think while that may not have a direct benefit to families, that has a benefit very broadly in terms of the development of autism understanding and hopefully treatments and prevention measures. But specific to the families, this is a unique opportunity for a family to get very rigorous assessment of their new baby very early on in life. Our partners at Kennedy Krieger Institute will see these new babies at 6 months, again at 12 months, again at 24, and again at 36 months. So at least yearly, and sometimes even more, families will get to talk to clinicians and sort of understand whether or not their child is developing typically or whether there might be some early signs and symptoms. And this is critically important in the field of autism and in developmental delays in general, because the earlier that you can intervene, the better the outcomes will be for that child. And so this is an exciting opportunity for these families to be able to get that kind of assessment done on these children. EARLI is designed as a quite long study in terms of the way research works today. And that's because we recruit women while they're pregnant or even before they become pregnant, and we partner with them through that pregnancy and through the first 3 years of life. That means for every family, we're really having a 4-year relationship. And so if you imagine doing that over time to recruit enough families that we have an ample sort of study set to be able to answer questions, this study is going to take somewhere between 7 and 10 years to complete. And so we don't anticipate having sort of full breadth of answers that we hope to accomplish until about 10 years from the time we started, which was in 2009. Now that doesn't mean that we aren't as eager as everyone else to get a heads up on these answers, and so we will be doing what we call interim analyses in the meantime, where we start with some of the early recruited families and try to ask some questions that we think we may be able to answer in a smaller number of families. And we anticipate that happening from, say, 2012 and beyond. So a question often asked by families of us is, what information does a family get back about any tests or other kinds of data collected on them as part of this study? And that's sometimes a tough thing to answer. The simple answer is, in terms of the developmental evaluations, we always prepare a very detailed developmental assessment feedback letter that we give to the families so that they can take it to their primary providers if they like, or they can just keep a record of understanding the milestones that are happening in this new baby. But in addition to that, questions have come up about what about any genetic testing that we've done or any other biosample testing that is done. And the challenge there to answer is, we are happy to give that kind of information back to a family when it is a clinically accepted kind of test. So if it's a test that you could then take to your provider and say, hey, I don't have to pay for this, or my insurance doesn't have to pay for this because it was already done, then we would be able to share something like that. Unfortunately, for the field of autism, there aren't such tests right now. And so right now, the kinds of things that we do are considered only research, and they don't have this sort of easily translatable or understandable interpretation and would not be useful to your provider in that way. So we have a sort of eye to the future that such things will be possible, and when they are possible, we will provide them. But right now, unfortunately, there is no test like that, and so right now there's nothing to give back to the families in that sense. We pay special attention to protecting the privacy of participants and their health and security in general. And this is important because we are following a family through a pregnancy, through a delivery, and through the early years of a new baby's life. And so we do several things to make sure that that happens. With respect to privacy, we typically give an anonymous ID to every family that participates. And unless it is absolutely relevant for one of our staff to know a family's name or phone number, etc., we don't use those things. We just use the ID. And that's our way of making sure that information a family wouldn't really want released publicly is not available to anybody except those who really need to know for our research purposes. We're also very sensitive to the needs of these families. This is a family that has a child already on the autism spectrum and who now has a new baby. That means there are a lot of pressures. So when the family comes in for assessments, we're particularly attuned to how sensitive a child might be to the environment around them during that clinic visit, or when we visit the home. We're also very aware of how things that our research may be doing might be scary to a child or to a family member, and so we pay particular attention to reducing that anxiety as much as possible, and we certainly will stop anything that we're doing that the mom feels is too much or uncomfortable for that family. At the CADI, we have been dedicating our work to understanding the causes of autism, both from a genetics and from an environmental perspective. And so the studies that we carry out, such as SEED and also EARLI, have really aimed at getting at that overall mission in question. And they do them in slightly different ways. SEED focuses on children who already have an autism diagnosis and tries to compare things that have happened to that child and to that family through pregnancy and early life by asking retrospectively about those kinds of experiences and comparing them to a group of children born at the same time in the same communities that have a typical development trajectory. And that's different than the way EARLI has approached it, which has really tried to seek out in our community families who already have a child with an ASD, who are now thinking of a new pregnancy or actually already begun a new pregnancy. And in that situation, we don't have to ask retrospectively, but instead follow these new families through time and get what we call prospective information about the pregnancy and about the new baby's life. And we hope from these two perspectives, we'll be able to put together a good picture of both the genetic and the environmental causes of autism.